Death Wish 2 also takes place in Los Angeles while the first film took place in New York. Winner also chose to film in real locations with his cast and crew protected by hired police officers.
I've always shot on location. Years ago I used to make documentaries with a crew of two people, me and the cameraman, and when I first went into a studio at Pinewood, which was meant to be very grand, it was quite awful. There were lots of rotten cardboard sets with net curtains over the windows because there was no view outside. And I thought, what is this what I've risen to? In that case I'll go back to where it's all there. And of course on location the thing is built by the type of people or the type of society you're filming. The streets, the houses, the rooms, all smack of the authenticity of the place.
So regardless of whether we consider the narrative premise realistic, the film captures the poverty-stricken downside of Los Angeles street life and puts it on display for millions of filmgoers to see. Many of the extras may initially look ridiculous, but according to cast and crew reports, these were just everyday people who happened to be in the neighbourhood and whom Winner personally picked out and hired to be in the film. Various examples of just how dangerous these real locations were can be found in Michael Winner's biography. The director explains that one of Charles Bronson's brothers was an alcoholic who kept showing up during shooting to borrow money. Bronson had to be careful not to lend him too much money at once in case he would be killed by others for the cash. Nevertheless, his brother was found dead in a cheap hotel room, having been stabbed in the buttocks. The transvestite extra, who had apparently shouted to Winner from a window that he wanted to be in the film, was also shot in the buttocks not long after filming. Maybe there was a serial buttock killer on the loose. The character Punk Cut was played very well by E. Lamont Johnson. All of the other actors playing the thugs in Death Wish 2 went on to make more films, and in the case of Lawrence Fishburne, acting fame. But Johnson died of AIDS just 2 years after Death Wish 2 was released. One possibility of how the rape scenes in Death Wish 2 could have been handled in a more critic-friendly manner is that rather than showing the rapes as matter of fact, they could have been shown in the flashback imagination of Paul Kersey, thus leaving some ambiguity as to whether the content of the rape scenes were real or just his own assumptions of what really happened. However, such an approach, as interesting as it might have been for the critics, would create moral vagueness in regards of the revenge scenes, which in turn would have made Death Wish 2 less commercially viable, being that the central appeal of the story is what I'll call the super-vigilante fantasy. The film also doesn't leave any questions about his memory abilities. Considering that there were 5 thugs who robbed him, it would be very easy for Kersey to kill the wrong person through mistaken identity. After all, identification of perpetrators is often the key determining factor in how law enforcement succeeds or fails to deal with crime. But as I've said, Death Wish 2 is a fantasy. It reflects the audience's desire to see a vigilante with super reliable powers, including photographic memory. The film does tentatively get around this.
What happened, Paul?
Nothing.
Well, you didn't forget your wallet. You never forget anything.
That's a clever line because it establishes that he forgets neither the crimes that have been committed against his loved ones, nor the faces of the perpetrators. The film seems to even acknowledge its own fantasy structure. The giant Hollywood sign is shown at the beginning and end of the film as if reminding us of the film industry itself. Stomper is shot and killed in what a news reporter describes as the vacant Hollywood Hotel on Hollywood Boulevard.
2 men were found tonight shot dead in the now vacant Hollywood Hotel on Hollywood Boulevard.
The cops are also presented as being somewhat useless. Sure, DNA profiling today would greatly increase the chances of catching these rapists, but Nirvana getting off with Frank Ochoa's murder isn't plausible.
Prosecution has presented only circumstantial evidence that Charles Wilson was the person that shot and killed Detective Frank Ochoa on the night of May 14th.
Forensics would clearly show that it was bullets from this rifle that killed him, and Nirvana's fingerprints would be all over the rifle left at the crime scene. Winner uses subtle visual communication to take his disgust for violent criminals even further by branding them as vermin. The van in which undercover cops stake out Nirvana's apartment block has a Tony's Exterminators Rat and Pest Control logo on the side. Winner denied that the film is an endorsement of vigilantism.
Well, of course, the idea of vigilantes is awful. It's not a theme that I approve of, but the picture doesn't say go and get a gun and kill your local mugger. The picture says society has reached this extraordinary point where people are so desperate for law and order that anyone who does this would be applauded. Now, people did applaud the first film. I believe they'll applaud the second film. I think this is unfortunate, but it certainly shows a mad, pathetic desire to clean up their lives at any cost.
Though he may have been just saying that to avoid further controversy. The actors playing the main thugs were given a lot of creative leeway by Winner. They even chose their own costumes and did their own makeup and went out testing their look on the streets to see how intimidated people would be. Lawrence Fishburne got himself a pair of magician's gloves and used his knife like a wand. And Howard waxed his eyebrows and shaved the front of his head to make himself look like a snake. He even picked up weird little mannerisms like his insane laugh, slapping his head and twirling a baton from watching a live drummer in a punk band. Stanley Kubrick was impressed enough with this that he cast Howard as the sniper-killing photographer in Full Metal Jacket, which incidentally included a hidden theme of rape. See my video on the subject for more. In Death Wish 1 there's a scene in which two guests at a party are heard arguing about whether the vigilante at large is a racist.
I'll tell you one thing, the guy's a racist. You notice he kills more blacks than whites.
Oh, for Pete's sake, Harry, more blacks are muggers than whites. What do you want us to do, increase the proportion of white muggers who will have racial equality among muggers?
Oh, no. Racial equality among muggers? I love it.
The assorted thugs of the film are an intentionally mixed group racially, more or less an even split between black and white, with the odd Hispanic thrown in. These details are probably slipped into the movie as a get-out clause in case any critics tried to accuse the filmmakers of racism. The same multicultural thug paradigm is crossed over to Death Wish 2, though without any dialogue emphasis. When Casey is preparing his vigilante hunt, he first seeks out a cheap room to rent. In doing so, he passes several cheap, run-down churches with religious slogans in their windows, including the words evangelist and rescue mission, and we hear the voices of preachers and congregations singing. Casey makes a point of stopping at one of these entrances and looks inside. He then turns his back on the venue, walks across the street, and does the same thing again, before going and renting a room from where he'll go on his spree of vengeance. It seems he is convinced that prayers to God go unanswered. A dialogue joke is also made in relation to both the Doctor's idiocy and his tendency to veer toward left-wing politics.
Say, Doctor, where is the men's room?
Let me show you. You go straight down the hall, around the corner, and second on your left.
Thank you.
The right.
Another example of Winner acting on spontaneous creative impulse is that he noticed Sherwood had a collection of glass cats in her home, and so he decided to have one of them used in the film as a symbolic prop to communicate Casey's grief about his dead daughter. In Death Wish 1, Casey kills people who are simply trying to steal money from him. Execution for attempted mugging is a very harsh punishment, and it wasn't self-defense because all the character had to do was point his gun at them and tell them to get lost, or he could have just wounded them in the legs. That would make them think twice about mugging again, especially if they were crippled. Death Wish 2 sorts out this moral flaw by having Casey go specifically after the men who raped and killed his daughter. It's a personal revenge story against rapists and murderers, rather than a general execute all muggers affair. Winner's ability to manipulate the cynical Bronson to his own creative choices is demonstrated in the ending of Death Wish 1. According to Winner's biography, Bronson didn't want to end the film with him pointing his finger like a gun at a gang of thugs, because it would be seen as an endorsement of vigilantism. They debated about it on set, but Winner knew that Bronson reliably wanted to wrap up the day's filming and get home to dinner, like he always did. So all Winner had to do was shoot the scene at the end of the day and keep Bronson debating. And eventually Bronson gave in and shot it the way Winner wanted so that he could get home and eat. Apparently Bronson then went around claiming that the ending was his own idea. It's also possible that Winner scripted a joke about this in Death Wish 2. As part of his ruse to gain access to the prison ward, Casey tells the warden,
I was told that Mr. K would be here on duty.
Well, that's me, but I can't let you through on this.
Well, Mr. K, I'm already late. I'd like to finish up and get back home to dinner. Now, if you don't mind, would you please show me to room 30?